Good evening and welcome to ALRA TV's Spotlight Show, where on Tuesday evenings we have a panel discussion talking about various topics and debating them and reviewing them and coming up to the same conclusion that the answer to 99% of the world's problems is in Sufism, is in divine love, is in spirituality. And thank you for joining us this evening. And I'd like to introduce our studio panel. We have Burhan Naqvi, welcome, and Sheikh Imran Ali. And also from Buffalo in New York State, we have Imran Mati joining us. Okay, guys, we're going to talk about radicalization. We're going to put radicalization under the spotlight. This is part 2 of a huge topic. When we talk about radicalization, we're not just going to talk about religions or any particular religion. We're going to talk about radicalization throughout political, social means. And so last week we spoke about the targets, that these radicals choose, the soft targets. And we went quite into depth with that. And we also spoke briefly about the antidote to it, which we're going to expand a lot more on today. But we're going to talk a little bit more about radicalization. Guys, what do you want to add to last week's discussion?
It's a sociological thing, trying to focus on rehabilitation. Because there's 3 sort of elements to it. There's the, in Singapore, they call it the 3 rings, basically.
Right.
There's the sort of inner ring. So there's the actual, they call them the detainee, but the offender, basically. Then there's the outer ring. So that's the sort of detainee's family, or the terrorist's family.
Right.
Then there's the outmost ring, and that's the wider community. And those are the 3 sort of stages of rehabilitation. But sort of the rehabilitation program doesn't just sort of stop inside of prison, basically. Families are so often ignored, I think, because if you've got a terrorist, it's highly likely that the wife or the spouse is going to become sort of involved in that radicalization as well. Maybe because they've been coerced, which is often the case, or just through being sort of radicalized alongside them. Mm-hmm. And when you sort of realize that we often kind of don't provide any sort of assistance or support to those families, and that in and of itself is the problem, because they become exposed to elements that might actually lend them towards extremism. So, we're only focusing in the UK on just one person, the offender, and we're not sort of looking beyond that. I don't know if anyone knows about Jihadi Jack. That's what they're calling him, Jack Letts. His family are struggling because of the actions of him. And the implications that they can't actually get sort of private counselling because it's still part of an ongoing investigation. It's troubling. And that just puts them sort of isolated. It sort of isolates them further. But, the thing that I really kind of want to stress as well, because those 2 are very sort of interlinked, but one thing that doesn't seem all that interlinked, but actually is in the context of extremism, is the outmost ring, which is the wider community. And the rehabilitation doesn't extend into the wider community. You can't rehabilitate a community unless you're sort of talking about what China's doing with the Uyghur situation, which is horrendous. It's disgusting. But that's just re-education. But that's not an element of rehabilitation, but prevention, essentially, which is sort of the opposite of rehabilitation, prevention. And trying to engage with the wider Muslim community is extremely difficult, partly because there's so much narrative that you see in not just media outlets, but I think the perception, sort of the zeitgeist. So there's the zeitgeist being the general perception sort of shared by many, whether they, are aware deeply of the innermost things or not, is that it's sort of highly racial, political against Muslims. So going into a community and simply talking about extremism, having an expert having somebody that's been trained in counterterrorism, or not counterterrorism, but trained in sort of I know the prevent strategy is pretty controversial, but there are other programs out there as well inside prison, counseling. A lot of these people are sort of trained counselors. They can tell you about sort of the extremist offender without sort of bringing in the entire community. It's difficult to get them into the community because there's just so much politics around it. And, I think there was my home place, actually, Cheetham Hill, where I'm from. I think the Prime Minister, David Cameron, he came to visit because I think he made a letter sort of asking all mosque members to engage more in sort of observing the sort of signs of extremist or radicalized behavior. And there was a lot of offense sort of taken by that. So he came to the community to kind of sort of build those bridges, which I think is a good start, actually. We don't often think about the impact of politicians kind of engaging more deeply with the Muslim community. Especially because, this isn't the United States. It's not it is not a conservative sort of, there's not a conservative mindset here. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't sort of exist on the fringe elements, but the idea that, everybody here is free and able to practice their own beliefs and it's a very tolerant. I'm not saying anything that's saying that the Americans sort of political system isn't that way, but in the UK, I think there's been efforts by the Conservative Party to embrace that more. And I think just in general, we don't see in sort of communities where you do have MPs that have sort of the majority sort of population of Muslim sort of peoples, that engagement between the MP and the Muslim community, it sort of only goes a certain way. And I think if they sort of went further into that, then you'd see a bit more of a difference, I think.
My intake into radicalization, I mean, it's not just about prisoners or people being brainwashed in prisons. If you look at it, I have been looking into the rise and fall of ISIS. The majority of people who actually joined ISIS were from people with very good, high-ranking backgrounds. People from whose parents are actually diplomats. They've been to university, well-educated, I'm telling you, well-educated. And somehow they, lost into, you're talking about being online in prisons. How about the people who are not in prisons? And they go online and they get brainwashed by just watching the videos. And they're thinking, there's a perception of this is the Islam, this is the right way. I don't want to say the religion at the moment, but unfortunately I have to say it. So they were brainwashed into this false dream that if they'll go there, they'll live in this Islamic state where they'll be praying and God knows what they'll be doing. But instead they got sold out, brainwashed heavily. Once they got there, it was a different story totally. And now there's a fall of ISIS. And everyone's scattered around. Most of the jihadis have died and some are in prison, but they left behind the kids. And surprisingly, the people who have been brainwashed are not from Syria or Iraq. They are people from America, Canada, very surprisingly, Australia, New Zealand and Norwegian. I mean, how does that come about?
Well, this is what we're saying. I mean, what motivates them and what do they use as the rewards that they're going to get? We understand lots of... if we're going to talk about radicalization within Islam, then you could about the damsels,
damsels,
things like that. They're promised, and you can maybe understand that their lower self is activated, that they're going to get a palace, and things like that. But this example I'm going to give is incredible. It really hit home for me because it's from my hometown in Hayes, in Hillingdon.
Okay.
And this sounds like what we have heard before, but there's quite a twist to the tale. And when you hear of this young lady, 36-year-old Safia Amira Sheikh, her name is, and she decided that she wanted to, she was radicalized, not through mosques, not going to mosques or worship places. It was all done online. And she converted And then she found all the wrong teachings, all, completely radical and extreme teachings of that was nothing to do with Islam. And she decided to strap a suicide belt to her, and she wanted to go to St. Paul's Cathedral, which is the biggest church in London, certainly, and where she could kill as many Kafirs as possible. That's what she wanted to do. She wanted to go either Easter or Christmas. And in getting this suicide suit and all the details, she went online and she joined up with this couple, a married couple, that she thought were interested in this kind of thing as well. But they were undercover MI5. So they got a good conversation with her. They got dialect with her. And when they found out who she was, her name is Michelle Ramsden. She's white, English, from a Christian background. And she'd been convinced to commit suicide, a suicide bomb inside a church, online. What would make her want to do that? What would be the end result for her?
It all ties back to the same thing, significance. The idea that it doesn't matter what you believe in. Everyone has that desire to sort of play a part in the things that they believe in. But with extremism, it's just taken to a completely different level. It's taken to a point where you can't even just look at it from a psychological perspective. It is more to do with just the type of person that's drawn to that. It doesn't, it doesn't actually, it doesn't just constitute, things like, so we were talking last week about the psychological factors, alienation and things like that. Sometimes, there are just certain elements. A person may have gone through all sorts of different sort of points in their life, but when something promises you to sort of get that sort of instant gratification, basically, even at the expense of your own life, and just sort of there's a similar thing that occurs with mass shooters in America, less ideologically driven in America, but at the same time, in America, what you have with the sort of mass shooting crisis that's going on is that sort of element of notoriety. And I think that that's something that we've sort of ignored. Most Usman Khan, the London Bridge attacker, he was getting fat injections before he was about to commit his terrorist attack. He wanted to look good, presumably on the day. So the idea that you would have a face, even though some of these people claim to do it, for a larger cause, the idea that you would have a face afterwards, that you would be presented to the media, that you would be spoken about by all these different news organizations and politicians, that gives a person significance in their life. And sometimes that's just the allure of it. So, in isolation and being fed all these different sort of views and things and lines, the things that you read, those things are sort of significant to that. But sometimes it is just the case of, I'm never going to be anybody significant. I'm never going to be able to fulfill my goals in life. This will give all of that straight away. And sometimes it is just as simple as that. And it's hard to prevent. It's hard to sometimes notice because, like you said, she didn't fit the profile at all of, to be honest, it's really unfair to say that anybody does fit a profile, because,
Thanks.
There are millions of Pakistanis, Arabs, Somalis, all different ethnic groups don't commit these terrorist attacks. They get unfairly labeled as terrorists each time. But I think the background that she came from, most people who do commit these terrorist attacks, they come from a Muslim background, even though they've become radicalized. She didn't come from a Muslim background, but it's not unheard of for that to happen. And, I'm just glad that they caught it when they could.
How about, for instance, we're talking about radicalization and mostly concerning with Muslim backgrounds and people coming from different grounds or maybe Muslim background and committing terrorist attacks. Yeah, so that's what we see online or even on TV. But how about those people who are not religious at all? I mean, there's a very rapid rise of far right in politics. Yeah. Politicians, they have a duty, but they're not doing their best. But they are maximizing from what's going on. Situations like migrants, for instance, or viruses that are going, and there are a rise of hatred towards migrants and people who are carrying the viruses or where it's coming from. So that's extremism. Doesn't necessarily need to be coming from religion or stabbing or shooting. That's an extremism. If you notice, most migrants are coming from Middle East, trying to go towards Greece, you've probably heard. And the local residents are actually blowing up their places or burning their places, sending them back.
Yes. Yeah.
That's an extreme measures being taken from the Greek side against migrants.
Yeah.
You see, that's radicalized as well. People don't want them around. They're radicalized, brainwashed to say, oh no, these people are not good. They're Muslims. They're coming into our country, and then they have this phobia. So, radicalization comes in many forms and different.
Gohar, can you hear me, Imran? Let's talk about the doctrines of Sufism. How this will help to combat these problems that we were talking about, these alienations of people, isolations of people feeling of no self-worth. And how can this doctrine of Sufism help them?
So there are three important modalities which I call necessary synergies. Firstly, we cannot ignore the fact that this is a struggle about ideas that are based on perversion of any political bias or religion. In this battle, the only lasting solution can be one that fully understands, addresses, and uproots the ideas themselves. And in this case, it cannot be other than the Universal Sufi Order and the doctrine that it carries with it. Mm-hmm. And secondly, in the understanding that this is a generational challenge, because we're talking about our future, we're talking about our future generation. We need to implement reforms now, so that the next generation has the understanding and skills to be, for building up resilience against these radical ideas. And finally, we should not, underestimate the need to fight this problem together, be it with the policymakers. I don't know, whatever it takes, we would have to do it. We have to reach to somebody which is in charge, somebody who is actually in charge of the educational system as well. And I think Sufi order has that doctrine to change it. I don't see any other way that we can be, this can be challenged now. So with that, why the superficial part of it is why Universal Sufism changed. Reason being is because all the classical methods have more or less not have been able to do their job. They seem pretty far-fetched. Now, my focus is exactly on the teenage people, the adolescents in their early 20s, teens. Those are our future, and that is what we need to worry about, because their minds are very immature. Talking about heart activation or taming the lower self. How many teenagers are thinking about that at their age? So we have to stoop down to their basic level of understanding, and then taking off from there.
That's definitely when we talk about the Sufism, we are talking about the universal Sufism, because obviously that's we're not just talking about Islam at all. We're talking about radicalization across all boards. So obviously people who are more attracted to political radicalization, extremism, they're just going to think that we'll have to convert to Islam to be a Sufi. Yeah. This is about, as we hear everywhere we go, people just think it's to do with Islam. It's a branch of Islam. It's not for us.
Yes.
But it's only the universal Sufism, the Universal Sufi Order, and that doctrine is the only one that's going to feed and quench these hearts. And all we can do, Imran, is that if we can just put it out there as much as we can, and hopefully somebody grasps it. It goes into schools, as you said, to teenagers, to the youngsters, and not only that, when they start to join ALRA TV and they start to see what's going on in here, because they're very much online people, as we know, Then they'll see the Universal Sufi Zikr. They'll start to build up positive energy, divine energy. And this is all positive help. We can't just keep saying that they need love. I mean, what kind of love do they need? All they need is consciousness, isn't it? They need self-awareness, where they are in the society, where they belong in society, where they belong within even their families. They feel detached because they don't have this consciousness of their soul and their real being. Mm-hmm. And this comes from the doctrines of Sufism.
I believe one of the things that as a Sufi, whoever is doing it, should be well aware of their needs, psychological, physical. They should be aware. The Sufi itself should have an enlightened heart himself. He should have tamed the carnal self. Otherwise, how would he recognize what is going on the other side?
Yes,
So being a Sufi is one thing, and maintaining the Sufi's path is another ballgame altogether. So as we speak, we need to refresh our own selves, tame our own carnal selves as well. And we should lead by example. People should actually relate to our character more than our words. Actions speak louder than words anyways. Yes. So they should actually immediately click onto our behavior, to our, not just our only level of intellect, but to our character. They should feel it it's coming from within. And that is when the hearts would click in, similar hearts. But whatever is going on for now, the IQ EQ program that we're offering, that is very beneficial. Yes. The book club, the introduction of the introduction of the book Deen Ilahi. I mean, to me, whenever my take of Deen Ilahi, it's just not only a book; it's like an entity on its own. Whenever I hear from it, it's just like the divine speaking right to my face. And that should be, that feeling from a Sufi should be transferred to the other individual as well. I think that is of the need. Yes. And you have other programs like Finding My Own Destiny. Those are very good programs. They set an example to other people, to whoever the youth, whoever is watching this program. And that's why I really encourage programs like Harry Speaks. Those are very young individuals. They go out on the streets. They know their slang. They know their jargons. Somebody like my age, in their 50s, probably don't even know what they're talking about. So we need to actually focus on our younger Sufis as well, which is very, very important.
That's absolutely true. Imran came up with some beautiful examples.
Fortunately, we couldn't.
Most certainly about leading by example. We should be an example of Sufism for others to see. Concentrate on our youngsters and on ALRA TV. If they're online, their nature is online. So let them get online and see something positive.
Yeah, lead by example. Right. Yeah. I mean,
engage more. I think
in the Universal Sufi Order, our main goal is for everyone to have the formation of a good character.
Yes.
And that will only it comes within, basically. And if you practice spirituality and go on the discourses that are from Sufi online courses that we have, you will see that once you start practicing, you will see a difference inside you. A formation of good character, that's the goal. You need to look into that.
Definitely. Goshima of our Sufi master, Yunus Al-Gohar. So this is the answer. Love, but this is divine love. This is connection to God, self-awareness, all this that comes when we're not talking about... I think that would be another thing. If people said Sufism is the answer, maybe they would think we were going to share poetry with them or dance in circles or sing songs. This isn't really going to serve the purpose. It's got to be the doctrine, isn't it? It's got to be the power, enlightening the heart, enlightening the souls, and self-awareness and God-awareness. This is going to be the key.
We need more teachers, I think, when it comes to this as well. Spiritual guidance, but also a technical sort of side to it, counselling.
Yes.
Because maybe love isn't always the answer. But, I've seen counsellors, and sometimes just having a counsellor just speak to people like as a congregation, and at the same time being sort of knowledgeable and aware of the spiritual side of things. That combination, it can have such a profound effect. A person, very well trained in that, in those programs, can speak about a lot of things beyond just sort of psychiatry and psychology. You can talk about, how it is that your life at home. You don't even have to be at risk of radicalization to listen to some of these people. We need more people out there, I think.
Yeah, we definitely need a counselor, but you need a divine counselor, not just any ordinary counselor. Divine counselor is the supreme being. He's the most loving. The answer is love, and once love enters inside you, and that's God. God is love, and love is God. Once the divine light comes inside you, he is your counselor. He is the guiding star. He will guide you and clean from inside and teach you the right thing, the formation of a good character. You don't need anybody counseling. When God sits in your heart, and that says the end, he's the one who will be guiding you and counseling you. Internal process starts from the first step of spirituality, and that's through the heart. And you need to connect your heart with God first of all, and then once you start connecting, you will see the divine counsel will come and sit in and start to take his position and start working. And you yourself can be a an inspirational person. You yourself, when you start spirituality, when you see changes inside you, people look at you and say, "Wow." Yeah. We've heard about many godly people in the books, but when they actually see somebody like you, you're like, I've never seen this like this. Your character is similar to what we've heard over this prophet and that prophet, and that comes within, and these things come within. You don't need to go far. You just need one supreme being. That's it. And once he's in, that's your
inspirational
life.
figures inside the community.
Yeah. But everybody can become inspirational once they start spirituality. Everyone will look up to each other. I look at Reverend.
And obviously you would have that. Not if we came across somebody like, as she was, Michelle Ramsden at that stage. Yeah. Obviously, you can explain to her that suicide is not part of Islam at all. I mean, or even murdering other people. Never mind suicide. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this all is done through the spiritual knowledge, the divine knowledge.
I'm sure if she'd spoken to someone, someone who was spiritual, someone who was just anybody, I think having that spiritual guy, if she had spoken to someone like that, she would have felt differently. Yeah.
Somebody would have most certainly said, you don't need to convert. We always say to people, you don't need to convert from one religion to another.
No.
Stay within your own religion and make that religion divine. Make that religion your connection to God.
Make your own churches and mosques and synagogues in your heart, because that's where God comes in. God's house is in your heart. And once he comes in, you don't need anybody. Once he's in, he takes over. By the moment, unfortunately, the world's in turmoil, and they are governed by an evil spirit inside, whether it's not evil but negative.
Yes,
you can say. We need to eradicate that, take that person inside. It's like having a lodger at your house, or what you call it? What's the word? What would you say? Just a lodger at your own house, and you don't want him in. Yeah. You try kicking him out, and you can't. So
we have an unwanted guest.
Yeah. And that's what we have at the moment. We have an unwanted guest, and we need to get rid of him. And the only way you can get rid of it is get the right owner to come in and get rid of him. So that's a way forward.
Imran, would you like to add anything to that?
To me, Sufi is divinely guided. That is the bottom line. The divine should reflect from his teachings, not just his personality, not just his mere words or logic that he uses. The divine should the divine should be felt to the other person, so that the other person can get attracted. I think afterwards, the Yunus mentioned last time we had this program. He mentioned that there's one thing, these religiosities and these political biases, but then there's also the nature of man. Some people are prone, and they're born with negative potential more than others. So I guess to me, the real challenge to a Sufi is to change that negativity into positivity. Now, I don't know how is that possible. I would really, really like Saidi to shed more light on this subject, because this is a real challenge.
And we're going to take that question. Yeah, what do you think? From Farooq Matu. Instead of Sufi system, we must call it human system. But we're really, if you like, want of a better word, we're advertising Sufism, and to become a human being. A human being has the soul's enlightened, a human being has the heart awakened and consciousness of other human beings. That's the only way you become a complete human being. As we're born, as Sufi Master explained very, very meticulously, I think it was in the Western Sufi course as well, that we're almost like a half human when we're born. And it's only through the enlightenment of the heart that you can call it a human system. So we have to carry on calling it a Sufi system, and until you walk on that Sufi path, then you can become a complete human being, isn't it? I think this is one of the main problems that...
Certainly make it more expansive calling it a human system. It would encompass so much. It would encompass the Sufis. It would encompass Sufi doctrines. It would also encompass just things we know about people in general. And it could encompass things outside of Sufism as well. Different Islamic beliefs.
Yeah, you can call it humanism, whatever you want to call it, but what is a human being? What does anyone know what makes a human being? You know, you're a compound creature. You're made physically and you have spirits inside you.
Yes, as Sufi Master is saying that humanism is entirely a different term. It can't be used to define spirituality.
There you go,
absolutely.
That's the right answer.
Spot on. There's a complete difference between humanism and spirituality.
It sounds more humanism would be more of an ideal or an ideology in and of itself. Kind of like human rights.
Yes, yeah.
Sort of adhering to that system of human rights, humanism. So, you know, the belief that every person is, you know, given that right to life, existence, freedom, all those different things.
Isn't it bizarre? I mean, people say, he's a human being, you know, he's a human being. We're not like animals. So does anybody know what a human being is and what makes a human being? How can you differentiate a human being with an animal? Because there are many people who look like human beings, they speak and do everything,
right?
But they behave like animals. Their characteristic is what differentiates from a human being to an animal.
That's the the distinct part about free will, though. Like, people behave like animals, but what they're really doing is they're observing some type of violent sort of streak from within and deciding to kind of willfully push that forward.
Yeah, but if you look at it, it's divine knowledge that's in our Sufism doctrine. Yeah, it's divine knowledge that we have that's telling us, hey, this is who we are. This is what the character should be. Having an evil spirit inside us is not making us human being. When we do things, people start blaming us because you're religious, because you're Muslim, or you're this, you're that. The bad character inside you, okay, that's not divine, is it? No one likes it, but they're still doing it. So what does human being mean? You know, same people who eat, drink, and go to the mosque, but at the same time, they'll be killing people.
Yes.
There's a lot
is that human?
There's a lot of philosophers that are going to look at that and be like, well, what does a human being?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you need to think, and you've got to think and ponder. You can't just say someone who eats, drinks, and sleeps is a human being, because his character defines who he really is. And if your character is no good, I mean, then you can't really call yourself a human being, can you? Because the same people are killing people in the name of God. And they define themselves as human beings, but they're not.
Right. Would you like to finish off with anything, Imran, over there in America?
I
we're going to
believe
just finish the show now.
The beauty about Universal Sufi Order is that it carries all religions into account. Not just one religion. It spawns terrorism. All of them can or cannot do. Yep. So the basic connection, it is here to make us remember who you are. What actually the divine wanted from humanity in the first place. We just talked about what is being human. A human is being humane in character. It should reflect the character of your creator. You know, so that, I think that is one of the things that, you know, makes us human, is, you know, remembering who we actually were. And, you know, that's all I can say for now.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and take care of yourself. Okay, guys, thank you very much for this evening, and thank you for joining us on the Spotlight Show, and we'll see you again next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Very good evening to you.